Welcome to Christiana's Psychic Cafe. I'm Christiana Gaudet, and we have a great show here for you. My guest today is Ambika Devi. Ambika really is a jack of all trades. She's a yogini, she's a musician, she's a tarot reader, she's an astrologer, and now she's a novelist. And she's written a really interesting novel that includes tarot and that includes some spiritual teaching. And I like to look at it, really from those two perspectives, especially. I love spiritual fiction, the idea that we can be entertained by fiction and read fiction, and that fiction can teach us spiritually. That was Ambika's goal for her book. Some of my favorite pieces of spiritual fiction, of course, I love The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. I love Marge Piercy's Woman on the Edge of Time. A lot of great books out there. Another thing that's great about Ambika's new book is it actually mentions tarot. And I love to see instances of tarot in movies, in books, in theater and poetry, everywhere in art. And, there's not, I think, a comprehensive repository on the internet of instances of where tarot appears in fiction or in movies or in television, although Mary Greer does have a great list of tarot in TV and movies on her blog. Another thing I like to think about that I didn't get a chance to speak with Ambika about is the connection between tarot and writing. Over the past few years, there have been a lot of tarot readers who have really been using tarot as a tool for writing. I don't know if Ambika used tarot to help her write her book, but it sure is interesting to see how tarot shows up in it. So let's go now to our interview with Ambika. Ambika Devi, welcome back to Christiana's Psychic Cafe. How are you?
I am awesome, and thank you so much, Christiana. It is so great to be here.
Well, it is great to have you here, and it is so great to see you. Now, the last time you stopped by the Psychic Cafe, I said we'd have you back when your book came out, and here it is. I'm holding it in my hot hand, and you've got it too.
How cool is that?
And I have had a chance to read it. I'm actually going through now and reading it a second time. I zoomed through it pretty quickly in anticipation of our conversation. But, here's what I'll say about it right off the bat. It's not a page turner in the sense that it's not a whodunit. We're not racing to the end to find out what's going to happen. It's not like that. It really is a book to be savored. And so I felt like I didn't have time to savor it. So now I'm going back and savoring it. And I encourage people to really take their time with it because there's a lot there. So I have so many questions for you.
Awesome.
And I may jump around a little bit. I actually sat down. I decided I was going to be really well organized about it. I sat down. I took notes, all the things I wanted to ask you, and then I just hit delete and said, no, we're just going to talk.
Cool.
Is this your first novel?
Yes, it is.
It's a very ambitious first novel.
Thank you.
Extremely ambitious first novel. And when I say that, I was reading some of the reviews. I haven't written my review yet, but I was reading some of the reviews, and someone compared your style to a very specific literary genre. And right away, the fact that in your first novel you're compared to a literary genre, that is something. Now, the genre that you're compared to is that sort of Tom Robbins, Douglas Adams, Richard Brautigan kind of timey-wimey, fanciful style. However, I think that we could equally say that Lilith is what I would call spiritual fiction. Fiction that teaches in a way, fiction that makes a spiritual point. And although I don't know that anyone else would see this comparison, as I was reading it, I was reminded of Mary Summer Rain. Are you a Mary Summer Rain fan at all? Did you ever read any of her books?
I have not.
And I cannot even explain, and I hope that someone else who loves Mary Summer Rain will also read this book and will tell me, you know, if that happens for them. And now maybe you'll go.
Oh, absolutely. I want to write it down because that's definitely, I was looking for a new book because I'm reading one right now. And I'm looking for one to take on my trip to Peru later this month. I will definitely check out her title.
Out Mary Summer Rain.
Absolutely.
Interesting stuff. And I don't know why. There's something about the flavor. It's not an obvious comparison. So I'll be interested to see what you think. And it's always interesting to note, what is the author reading? What are you reading right now?
My favorite author next to Tom Robbins is Christopher Moore.
Really?
Yes. And my favorite book of all time is definitely Jitterbug Perfume, hands down. If you want to date me, you have to read it out loud to me.
I got to tell you, we're never going to date.
That's okay, but that's a big deal breaker and winner for me. Christopher Moore, I've met many times. I've gone to many book readings. I've followed him since the beginning, since Island of the Sequin Love Nun, and I've always so much enjoyed things about not just his singular books, but how characters recur. Okay. And maybe they don't show up for a book or two and then they do later. And I so want to use that. I've already got my next novel in the works, even though there's a book in between. And Lilith, the character Lilith, will definitely show up in that next novel, which has a loose working title that I'm not sharing yet.
Okay.
You know, that kind of behavior. And, I just recently read, the last book I read was The Life of Pi, because I saw the movie first, and the book, amazing. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, even better, listen to it on audio, on Audible, because I love being read to. And I love people who can do different voices, and I myself love to do different voices. Hopefully you all will watch my video trailer I made for Lilith, because I did all the voices, and I will definitely read my book as an audiobook and do all the voices in the book. That's something I love to do. So recently read Life of Pi. Before that, I read a Christopher Moore book called Sacre Bleu, which is about the color azure blue. And I went to art school. That was the first college tour I did. And I loved painting, particularly watercolor. So I was instantly attracted to that title. And it turns out that book has a lot to do with creative inspiration. So I really recommend that one. There's so many titles of his I adore. Several I've read over and over. Lamb, Fool. Oh gosh, I've read everything he has. He has a vampire series for those of you who like Anne Rice, who need to step out of your circle a little bit and get some humor, because Chris is hilarious. And if you ever have the opportunity to meet him live and listen to him read and talk, I highly recommend it. He is one of my great inspirations as a writer, as is Tom Robbins, of course. I have read Jitterbug Perfume more times than I can count. I own multiple copies of it. I have it on my Kindle. I'm waiting for somebody to read it out loud to me. I understand the difficulty of making a movie of it. And I did explore with Lilith that with one of my former teachers, Philip, who endorsed on the back of the book. And he said, there's many parts of this book that could easily be a movie, but is it a movie in itself? No, it really is bridging on that kind of self-help or guidance book or spiritual novel, which is definitely the genre I was going for. I originally wanted to write a self-help book, and my publisher said, no, 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 it has to be a novel. And that's what took me so long. Because
let's talk for a minute before we really explore Lilith. Let's talk for a minute about that concept of spiritual fiction, fiction that teaches. Obviously, Jesus thought it was a good idea to teach by telling fictitious stories, parables.
Correct.
And I think it's true in many schools of spiritual thought. There's mythology and all of that. So I think spirit teaches through fiction in a lot of ways. But I'm curious, as you have traveled through the world and learned different things, what are the spiritual novels that have influenced you? And would you consider Tom Robbins' novels to be spiritual?
Yes, on the Tom Robbins, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. So many of his have so many teachings about relationships, about relating to the planet, about relating to ourselves. And he was one of my early influences. Also, Hermann Hesse. I read all of his stuff when I was a kid.
Sure.
I had read every single thing he had written by the time I was 14. I consumed it. It was Siddhartha. His book Siddhartha about Buddha was given to me in 6th grade, and I devoured it. And throughout my life, I've bought many, many copies of that and given it as gifts. Also, Carlos Castaneda. Read all of his stuff as a teen. As I got to the end of the original Don Juan series of his, I kind of faded out and went on to other writers. I think about them was probably when I was discovering some of these other writers. But then more modern, of course, Paulo Coelho. And I even think the Four Agreements, because the Four Agreements teaches through story, and I love assigning that. That is usually my number one first homework assignment for clients, because as you know, I counsel people, and I'm an alternative life coach, astrologer, tarot reader, but I'm always recommending the Four Agreements. And even, catch this one, Christiana, Steve Harvey. Have you read any of Steve Harvey's books?
I have not.
He writes relationship books. Yeah, and one of his books was made into a movie. Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man is the book. And the movie, Think Like a Man, is so funny. I've watched it over and over and over again. I'm also inspired by movies and also by movie book combinations, very much so. When I was in art school, I took a course called Literature and the Film. And we would read the books and then watch the movies, which in some cases, the movie just falls short for you.
Right.
But my professor did his very best to find good examples. And in some cases, 2 movies made from the same book, which was interesting. Everything from Shakespeare to modern literature. And I took every semester of that I could until I wanted to take one again, and they said, no, you can't do this anymore. You're done with this. Move on, kid. So I guess I was destined to do this, and definitely there's movie treatments and screenplays bubbling in here, So we'll see what happens. Maybe Lilith will be a spin-off. There's many ways it could go. I could definitely write something for the Anne Rice, I don't like this genre, but horror. I would rather call it mediumship, because I would rather have a point to it than just a bunch of guts all over the screen. Definitely in Lilith, all the teachings of all the gurus and great yogis that have been in my life are embedded in there.
Right. That is abundantly clear. So the thing that was also very clear to me, because I know you, I'm pretty sure that a lot of this is autobiographical.
Of course it is.
So of all the names that you could have chosen, Lilith is such a charged name in mythology and in so many ways. Why Lilith?
Well, I'm funny. And one of the funniest usages of the word Lilith to me was in the TV show Frasier, because there was a character named Lilith.
Lilith Crane.
Yes.
That's right. And I never watched Frasier, but I was a Cheers fan.
Uh-huh.
Of course, that's where they meet and get married.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And I was a huge Cheers fan too.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first use of the name Lilith that made me go, that's funny. And then I explored, what is Lilith?
Mm-hmm.
Then as an astrologer, I use a point. There are two Lilith points in astrology. One is an asteroid in the asteroid belt, where there are hundreds of asteroids. There's a Lilith asteroid.
Right.
The other more commonly used Lilith point is called the dark point, or the dark side of the moon. It's not actually the dark side of the moon. It's actually a mirror point to the moon. And in an astrological chart, I use it as what I call, especially in relationship charts, where you get your freak on. So,
Okay.
so those were the influences of why Lilith. Now, Lilith, this book started and was born out of a book I was writing. I was writing a book about numerology, which was really not supposed to be a numerology book, but it was loosely a numerology book. I was going for writing stories that it was kind of like a series of essays, probably influenced by watching Carry On Sex and the City too much. And I thought, I could put all my essays and stories, and they could all relate to numbers. And the book was called 13. And the subtitle was The Number of the Great Mother Goddess. So the Great Mother Goddess was kind of hanging out there in my head. And then I was with Nick Ligodakis of Inkwell Productions, my publisher, and we would have meetings, and I would bring essays. He would give me assignments, and we would talk about numbers, the numbers 0 through 13, and I would write about them. And I'd come back the next meeting, and he'd read, and we'd talk more. So one week we were talking about the number 8. Now I'm a Scorpio. That's the 8th house. My natal sun is in the 8th house. So that puts a lot on 8. So we were talking about 8 and the mystery and the plutonic, meaning the planet Pluto, influence over that house. And what does that mean to me? And that got me really thinking. And the next thing I knew, Pluto, the creator, was definitely my muse. And instead of writing what I would call an essay, like I had been, I started writing Lilith. Now, the beginning at that time is deeper in the book of what you're actually holding in your hand, because the book starts a little bit differently. And I showed up at my meeting with Nick, and he's reading, and I'm flopped down on his couch like we always do. And all of a sudden I hear this slap noise on the paper, and I jump up startled, and he had taken his glasses and put them up in the middle of his forehead, and he's looking at the paper, and he's saying, "This is it, this is it." And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, "This is the book. Stop writing everything else. Go home and write this. This is what you're supposed to be writing." So with his grace and coaching is how that came to be. What was getting stirred around in a pot then got filtered and put into something and made into a novel. So that was the very beginning. Later on, he told me to go back and write like the prequel, write a new beginning. So he's an incredible coach. I highly recommend him. If anybody's looking to write something, definitely get in touch with me. I'm scouting for Inkwell Productions, and we do everything from children's books, self-help, all kinds of books, and it's a co-deal. So it's considered indie in the big world of the big houses, but you do get support and great editing. So that's how this all got started.
Now, the artwork on the cover is really pretty interesting. Let me hold it up so people can see it. And if you see this character here, you'll see, and I don't know that I've ever seen this in a book before, but let me see. I don't know if people can see this, but the character is actually on each page by the page number, and the page number's in a little cloud. And it's just such a nice detail. I don't know. It's unusual.
Well, thank you. I did that.
Did you do the art?
I did.
So you really are sort of this multi-talented person, you know, where I know you do music, you do metaphysics, you do yoga, you do art. Now you've got a novel. And as we said, the character of Lilith, I guess, is to some extent, okay, on the scale of very much to very loosely, how much is Lilith you?
Well, it's not just Lilith, the character, but all the characters are me.
Okay, well, very good. So if you really want to know if you want to be reading Jitterbug Perfume to Ambika, read this and then you can decide.
But it is fiction. It is fiction. So I did take great liberties and I did make up stories. So you could get misled thinking one of my stories is about me. Now, also, I did take information from people I know. So be careful. When I know you, you could end up in a book. So I take bits from people. I take bits from myself. I take bits from my observations, and I mold them into characters. When I hear a good story, now I'm very polite. I'll say, that was amazing. If I write this down, may I use it in a future book? So I actually do get sign off on them. Because sometimes people tell you things and you know what, Christiana? You can't make that stuff up. You just can't make that stuff up. Now, I did take liberties on some of the stories inside Lilith. I did research. One thing I love about Christopher Moore's books and that I totally honor is that when he writes about something historically or scientifically, he goes out and he researches it. He goes to the place. He asks questions. He educates himself. And I thought to myself, wow, this is back before I ever knew I would write a book. I thought if I ever do something like that, that's how I want to do it. I love that level of integrity. So there's reality to it. Now, I did live in South Philadelphia. I did go to art school. Some of those things that happen in that part of the book, those are all real. So you'll just have to ask me. That's what people do is they read something and they go, Ambika, I need to ask you a question. This bit right here, does this happen? So that's usually what people do, and that's fine. I love that. That just means you guys are reading it. And the fact, Christiana, that you said you want to go back and reread it, oh, my goodness, I'm verklempt. Thank you.
Now, one of the things, of course, that struck me right away when the book first arrived is you have a tarot card imaged on the book, and obviously it's a specific tarot card. It is the Lovers. Once one reads all the way through the book, if you have any concept of tarot, you'll understand why I think that card was chosen rather than any other. But do you want to speak to the Lovers in this context at all?
Sure. Well, also woven into the story of Lilith is my master's thesis, which is on a very particular viewpoint of how the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and the powerful magnetic energy that is also part of the divine feminine irresistibly brings them together. And that is the oneness. We've had discussions on the Lover's card. I know you discuss it a lot on your vlogs about tarot. And so that relationship is about not just my relationship with a man or a man's relationship with a woman, but our relationship with maybe the unseen side of ourselves, and also our relationship with the great unknown, which is that divine spirit, you know, that divine spirit, if we're going to use the G word, God. And though I come from an Eastern philosophy, with a master's in yoga and now 3 years into a PhD in a very particular type of yoga, a meditation practice, I am educating and teaching people about what does that all mean? The feminine is the fleshy, tangible, creative, not just this, it multi-level, many levels of information or definitions. The divine masculine is that primordial energy. What keeps things going? What makes electrons spin around? What is the energy inside of them? Quarks, if you're familiar with quantum physics. And this is where I go all nerdy, right? But what is that energy that drives stuff? Just like electricity. What is that energy that attracts me to you? You know? So I wanted to take these really chunked up concepts that I wrote about in my master's thesis, thinking, who the heck is going to pick up my master's thesis? Such a tiny slice of people. And when I talked to Nick about it and said, I think I want to embed my master's thesis into this novel, he said, great idea, brilliant. You know, so I went with it. And that's when I created the nature spirits to be the teachers, because I didn't want it to be a person. I didn't want it to be tangible. I wanted it to be something that everybody could feel like they could tune into. There's a lot of talk about spirit guides. What really is that? Do they really have wings? Well, maybe, you know, obviously I see them that way. But what does having wings really mean? It just means freedom to fly, right? Freedom to just go with it. So there's a lot of metaphor in this book. Though I may talk about something in a tangible sense, it means multi-layers and levels of things. So it will give a great deal to teach and talk about.
And that, if the way it sort of broke down for me is the two main characters, Lilith and Dawn, each have a lot of other voices. And Lilith's other voices are these spirits that are talking to her and guiding her from a place different than where the stories are unfolding. And Dawn has this great thing going on that I think is teaching on a whole other level. And it actually reminded me of this old, I can't even remember what decade it was, but it was a TV show called Herman's Head. Tell me, did you ever see Herman's Head?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but also Ally McBeal was definitely an influence for that bit.
This may have been the same time period. I don't know.
I do remember it, but there was the thing about what's going on inside somebody's mind, and then an actual movie style visual. I always love that concept because that's what it really becomes. We can get so caught up in the mind and what the mind is speaking to us. This in yoga is called samskara, these loops or tapes, but they can actually become, HD videos. And that's the picture I was hoping to paint in words with humor, because sometimes it's just comical. If we can back up into what's called the witness state, that we can actually witness this conversation, it becomes humor. It's funny. We're not caught up in it. We're not reacting to it.
Well, and I was wondering, because obviously you are also a professional tarot reader, astrologer, all of that. And I know in my own tarot practice, part of what I do when I'm looking at people, and let's just explain to people who haven't read the book that the voices that Don deals with are the different characters in his head, the different aspects of his personality. The reason I bring up Herman's Head, if you've never seen it, I didn't run for very long, but it was just this dorky guy, and we got to see inside his head all the different characters that motivate him. And that's what's going on with the character of Don. He has a committee in his head, and the different voices are the different aspects or the different motivations. And it is kind of funny because, of course, his horny teen has a voice, as does his low self-esteem. And And I think we all do have that. I call it the committee. We all have a committee in our heads. And when you're doing a reading for someone, sometimes it becomes very apparent that they're listening to a messed up voice in their committee, and they have to tell that person to sit down and shut up. Or there's a voice in the committee, their wounded inner child, perhaps, that really needs to be nurtured and acknowledged. And so I'm betting that you've had this experience as a tarot reader.
Oh,
And I'm wondering if that's sort of part of what formed that for you.
well, definitely. Actually, the greatest inspiration for the idea of a gavel-wielding leader of the committee came from the Swami who named me Ambika Devi. She is Swami Sita Ramananda of the Shivananda lineage. And she is from Vietnam and such an amazing teacher. She runs their ashram in California. If you ever have a chance to witness her in a video teaching or in person, I highly recommend her. Amazing, brilliant, brilliant teacher. She, one morning in satsang, so it's 6 o'clock in the morning at the ashram, and we're sitting there. And in the morning meditations, whoever's leading, and it's Swami du jour. You know, you never know who's leading. It's from the committee at the ashram. So she's leading, and I'm extra fidgety this morning, you know, trying to find my seat, trying to sit still, having homework to do, because whenever you're there studying, it's piled on you. And she starts talking about the voices in your head and how to quiet them down. So I perked up. I was really interested, like, how do I shut this up? Swami, please, Swamiji, teach me. So, you know, and I'm far away. I'm in the back of the house. And she's speaking very softly. She goes, sometimes you must put mind in corner, take a very large hammer, whack in head, tell, shut up, time to meditate. And that, I had to use that. It was hilarious, you know? I mean, I think a bunch of us just started crying. We were laughing so hard and trying not to be overt and loud about it, but we busted out. We're all tearing and crying because it was just a cartoon image. Now, again, with the voices in the head, all the classic cartoons of the angel and the devil, you know, on the shoulders. I love that. I mean, there's so many examples of it, so I wanted to create my own example of it.
Well, and, you know, I think going back to, you know, the concept of the lover's card as kind of the center stone of the energy of this, and then looking at the feminine character, Lilith, with her spirit voices, external spirit voices coming in, and then the masculine, Don, with his internal voices coming out. I think you really did weave this thing. And that's why, you know, I have to say, this is not your average novel. It doesn't read like an average novel. And if you're, you know, if you're a Nora Roberts fan and looking for a cheap romance novel, this is not that. And that's fine. That's fine. There are plenty of those. Now, as far as like, when you decided that you wanted to put these teachings, you know, not just telling, I mean, I see a couple of things I see three things going on here. First is you really tried to put together a challenging piece of literature. And I think for the most part, you succeeded at that. Second, you wanted to teach something spiritual. And third, I think in midlife, in your midlife crisis, you wanted to tell your stories. And you know, reading it as a woman in midlife, I have to say it touched me on that level. So let me ask you, from that spiritual perspective, the perspective of putting spiritual teachings on paper, as you said, initially in your head, this was a self-help book and morphed into something else. Who's the audience for that? Who do you think most needs to hear these teachings?
Everybody, because the bottom line is, in any relationship, and as readers, as guides, as life coaches, you and I know the number one question is about my ex, right? The number two question is about when will I have either relationship or career. With relationship running way ahead of the pack and career kind of trailing in a trot behind it. But all of these involve relationship. And so my greatest teaching that I want to share, and my intention of spinning off into workshops, lecture tours, things like that, is about creating a good relationship with yourself and honoring the divine inside of you. And knowing that the great mother goddess is in your heart. And when you stop reaching outside of yourself and looking to fill a perceived hole inside of yourself with anything and everything, whether it be a person, a relationship, one that's passed from your family, whatever went wrong with your parents, your siblings, your childhood friends, your teachers, the future, what you want to create, you want a career, the number one important relationship is with self and with divine, whether you call it God, whether you call it Gaia, whether you call it goddess, whatever the name, as long as you're honoring that all of that is inside of you, that's what I'm intending and hoping that you all are getting from this book, Lilith.
Perfect. And so again, ambitious. I mean, this is an ambitious book on every level. So just on a whole other topic, you're off to Peru.
I am.
Tell us about that.
Well, actually, Peru ended up in the book. A couple years ago, when I finished my master's thesis, I met a shaman, a female shaman named Leslie Myber, who is from Cusco, Peru, and she's well known there as La Gringa. And she is, don't you love it? Doña Leslie La Gringa. She's from South Africa. She ended up becoming a Huachuma shaman. Huachuma is a cactus that's used to open up the heart chakra. So I went to a ceremony, met her. She grabbed my hands when we initially met and said, "Dear, you must come and you must drink and partake of this in my magic garden." Well, somebody invites you to a magic garden. You say no. So as soon as I got home from that trip, I bought a plane ticket. I figured the whole rest would unfold around it. So in 2012, I gathered some friends together, and it was not like I was leading a tour, but I was kind of leading the group. Right. But it was a group of friends. Some came and went. One traveled with me the whole time. One actually started off and then ended up going later. So it was just a little trip through Peru. I went to Cusco. I spent time with Leslie and her family. I stayed at her beautiful, beautiful places. She has a smaller hotel and also a bigger one, which is a boutique hotel that she's co-owner in. We did ceremonies. We met shaman. We had cocoa leaf readings, which is like a tarot card reading. It is so cool, Christiana. They take a handful of cocoa leaves and of coca leaves, and they spread them out and they read them like tarot cards. It is so fascinating. I can't wait to do it again. The folds or the shape, they all mean things, and sure. Thank goodness I speak Spanish. I got a lot more out of it. They do these amazing ceremonies, cleansings. It's all very spiritual. You connect with nature. So when I got home from that, also, I was at Lake Titicaca. I mean, I could talk a whole show about Peru. Maybe we'll do that when I come back from this trip. So when I got back, I thought, actually, right before I left to come home from that trip, her twin sons and the woman who runs the travel business with them said to me, "We love you. You're amazing. You would make a great tour leader. Why not do a whole tour?" So I thought, I listen to these words of God. This is when God is talking to us, everybody. When somebody gives us loving guidance, we need to tune in on it. If more of us would do this, we would be so much happier. There's some free guidance for everybody, right, Christiana? Right. That's the voice you need to listen to when God speaks out of somebody else's mouth and it feels something and you tingle a little. Go for it, people. Write it down. Save it for later if you can't act on it now. But that is divine. That is divine. So I came home and I planned out a trip. But last year, my PhD really took off. And then Lilith needed to get an editing. We edited this book. I edited creatively and then copy for a year and a half. So to make a book get as tight as I got it, it takes a lot of time and work. Sure. A lot of work. It's not, like I'm whipping out 10 books in a year. This had a lot of combing and reweaving. Anyway, so I planned a trip, but we couldn't do it last year. It just wasn't right timing, and there was just too much going on. So I said, well, maybe I'll try with another travel company, see if they can do it. They dropped the ball. So at the beginning, or at the end of last year, I thought, hey, I'm going to just throw it out there, see what happens. Just like a teaser, not even really planning it. And I got a bunch of interest, so I went with it. Right. And now people are saying, well, I didn't make it on your trip this year, but I really want to go with you next year. And I thought, okay, I'll plan next year. So everybody, if you want to go in 2015 with me, it's going to be in the summertime. Definitely find me on Facebook. Christiana will definitely show you how to find me. And, join me. I'm only taking 8 people. So it's intimate and you get a lot of attention. And this is not a trekkie, sleep in the dirt, get rained on kind of trip. We're staying at a boutique hotel, Yes, we're going to Machu Picchu. Yes, we're going to archaeological sites. There'll be a lot of learning, and I'll be teaching. We're going to learn about the astronomy of the Southern Hemisphere. It is very, very cool, and with a lot of the mysticism and healing and readings from shaman. So how cool is that? Don't you want to
go? Sounds fabulous. So, one other thing I wanted to comment on is how much I loved your description of South Philly. And, to me, the way it read, I've been to Philly a few times, but it's, not my northeastern city. My northeastern city is New Haven.
Right.
But it really felt the same way, and if you think about it, Philly and New Haven are similar in a lot of ways, both college towns, northeastern college towns, both strongly Italian. And it really made me homesick for my northeastern city, of course, of 25 years ago.
Right.
But it really made me want to go eat a pizza and
Goddess help us. I don't know if our digestion can take it anymore. But I guess I would have to risk it. And also the falafel. Falafel. And from time to time, I'm commenting on Facebook about falafel. Mamoon's falafel was, to me, the only falafel. So yeah, absolutely. The culinary references in Lilith have not been good for my figure. And very much, here we, you and I both are now Florida girls. Right.
But it really, as a Northeastern, and I am a Florida person. I will probably be here for the rest of my life. Probably, I think. But, at core, aren't you always a Northeasterner, really?
Well, my original astrology mentor, Barbara Shearer, who was so amazing. I studied with her for almost 2 decades, maybe even more. She wrote for Sedona Times. She was married to Jim Shearer. They wrote a lot of astrology books together back in the 60s. And I began studying with her in my early 20s and then went on and ghost wrote for her when websites came into fashion and worked with a web guy for her, creating web pages while she could maintain her magazine articles. She wrote a lot. She was prolific, and what a goddess. I actually presided with Jim, her former husband, when she passed away for her funeral. The 2 of us conducted that. So she used to say this. She used to say, it is uncanny that this is her speaking, when I read astrological charts and people are born in the Northeast, they never let go. They always end up back there, or they return and return and return, or they just never leave. She said it's more uncanny than any other place on the planet. And I do geomancing, which is planetary with placement on the planet, also known as astrocartography. I learned a great deal of this from her, and it is uncanny. Now, look at me. I moved out west. I lived out west for a decade, and I'm back here on the East Coast. You know, of course, a lot of us end up back here because of our parents. Our parents came from the north. They end up in Florida. That's what brought me here. Will I stay here? I don't know. I love it. I'm real comfortable in this little house. I have a great quiet place to be. It's good for writing, but who knows? Who knows? I mean, I have wanderlust, intense wanderlust. I have Sagittarius in the midheaven. It's mid-Sagittarius, so, you know, I'm a poetic wanderer. I want to wander all over the planet and write words about it, you know, so, and teach spirituality. So, hello, I'm living my chart. Yeah, I have to agree. Now, pizza, I fantasize about it, but goodness help me, I don't think I can digest it anymore. You know, I'm vegan, so there's so many reasons why, but I did put it in the video trailer, because there is a chapter called Enlightenment by Pizza, which is actually the chapter I read to yogis. And that's it's chapter 29 in Lilith, and it's about relationships. And when I start reading it, I usually think, well, they'll only last a few pages. And every time I read it out loud to a group, I check in, and everybody gets kind of quiet, and I say, how you doing? You want me to read some more? And they're all, read the rest. So I'm like, oh. So I end up reading the whole chapter. So whenever I'm talking to people who teach classes where it's appropriate to read out loud, like a relaxation class or a yoga class or an inspiration class, I always recommend that chapter for yogis. It's about balance, it's about relationship, and it's about pizza. So, you know.
What you need.
You know, years ago, I realized if I want people to come to meditation classes, if I would say chocolate meditation and I gave them really great organic chocolate, they would come. So I understand if you put good food into something. That's why I loved like Water for Chocolate. There were recipes in every, I thought about doing that, you know, a recipe, but I decided, I'll just put the food in the whole thing, you know.
Well, it worked. It worked. So the book is Lilith by Ambika Devi. What's the best way, people who have not yet gotten their copy of this book, what's the best way for them to do that?
The easiest way is go to www.lilithnovel.com. That's Lilith's page on my home site. And pretty much anything you click on there will take you to a place to purchase. She's definitely available on Kindle and Nook as well electronically for those of you who like to conserve trees or prefer having a gazillion books in your Kindle. I do both. Every link is there. So just Lilith, just like the book title, novel. No spaces, no dots. www.lilithnovel.com. And easy enough to find everything from there. It'll take you to Inkwell's page. If any of you are writers and you want to talk to me, almost on any page on my site, you can click to email me, find me on Facebook. I'm more than happy to connect with you and help you, mentor you, give you a reading, look at your chart, help you find out what your career path is or how to have a better relationship with yourself. And by all means, if you want me to bring my book and myself to your place, your town, sponsor me, talk to me, let's do it.
Okay. Ambika Devi, I want to thank you so much. Good luck in Peru. Good luck writing the next book. We can't wait for it. We'll have you back soon here on the Psychic Cafe.
Thanks, Christiana.
It's amazing how many tarot people are so talented, so gifted. It's great to be part of such a phenomenal, talented, creative community. I've written a couple of books too, but no fiction yet. But if you're interested in tarot, you might enjoy taking a look at my books. Hi, I'm Christiana Gaudet. Tarot is my passion. my spiritual path, and my profession. And I'm happy to share with you my book, Tarot Tour Guide. Tarot, the Four Elements, and Your Spiritual Journey. Whether you're a brand new tarot reader just starting out, or a seasoned professional, or anywhere in between, there's something in this book for you. Tarot Tour Guide works with the idea that tarot is a journey, the Fool's journey and your journey. In this book, you'll find descriptions of the tarot cards. You'll find clues for the tarot beginner as well as exercises for the advanced student. You'll find tarot meditations, tarot magic, tarot spreads, and many tarot exercises with the double purpose of teaching you how to work with the cards and using the cards to find out deeper information for you. So if you're interested in tarot, or if you're passionate about tarot like I am, Tarot Tour Guide is for you. My name is Christiana Gaudet. I've been a successful full-time professional tarot reader for 20 years, and I'm the author of Fortune Stellar, what every professional tarot reader needs to know. If tarot is your passion and you want to share that passion with others, this book is for you. In 8 easy lessons, you'll learn how to use your tarot deck as a guide to help you discover your greatest skills and abilities as a tarot reader, and to help you design a business that serves your community and that fits perfectly into your life. Get started on your path now with Fortune Stellar. Well, I hope we've been able to add to your summer reading list. We'll see you back here next week for more insight, inspiration, and interviews here on Christiana's Psychic Cafe.